everybody, welcome. So this is what we're going to be creating today. We're going to embroider some nice roses on some Converse sneakers. For this video I chose a bunch of different colored embroidery floss. I went for more neutrals and pastel colors to match the sneakers, but obviously that's optional. You can choose whichever embroidery floss you'd like. We're going to need a couple of supplies. First off is embroidery needles. You can get those from Walmart, they're pretty cheap. And we're also going to need some scissors. Here I'm showing where we could be embroidering on this shoe. There's a lot of different places as long as you have the same one that I do. I'm just going to be embroidering on the outside portion right here. So I highly recommend untying your shoe before you begin. It just makes it so much easier once you start embroidering. Now we're going to take our pink embroidery floss and start one of our roses. I just picked a random spot on the side of the shoe that I want to embroider. It really doesn't matter starting out. Always make sure to tie off the edge so you don't pull your embroidery floss through. Now we're going to start stitching. It really doesn't matter where you place your first stitch. Alright, now this part gets a little hard to explain. So you're going to start your second stitch at the edge of your first stitch. I also apologize for the bad footage on this first rose. I underestimated the difficulty of embroidering and videoing at the same time. Alright, now that we've began our second stitch, we're going to end it on the other side of our first stitch. It's basically parallel to the beginning of our second stitch. Just a warning, the Converse material is incredibly hard to get embroidery needles through. So we're really just going to be repeating that process over and over again until we reach a good sized rose. You can see that I'm really taking my time with the placement of my needle, just because wherever your needle goes, that's where the floss is going to end up. This is pretty important to remember because if you have a lot of space in between your stitches, you're going to have a lot of space inside your roses and they're not going to look as good. It's also important to note that I am not a professional embroiderer. I really don't know anything about embroidery. I'm kind of just making this up as I go. I'm sure you could look up more in-depth embroidery YouTube tutorials if you were interested. Now we're going to be working on the leaves of our roses. You're going to place the first stitch of your leaf wherever you like. It doesn't matter where the leaves go. I try and have the leaves differing in directions when it comes to each rose. Honestly, it doesn't matter the directions of your stitches when it comes to the leaves. It does matter when it comes to size. I try and have the outer leaves longer than the inner leaves. So again, we are beginning our second rows. It doesn't really matter the placement of this one either. It doesn't matter the placement of any of them. Wherever you like works. So again, we're starting our second stitch of our second rows at the edge of the first stitch. Now we're going to end our second stitch on the other side of our first stitch, parallel to the beginning of our second stitch. Now we're on to our third rows. This is the exact same process as the previous two. So this is what we have so far. We have our 3 roses and a couple embellishments. This is the one I embroidered before this one. Let's keep going. Here I'm just adding more leaves to this brown rose. And then adding even more leaves to this orange rose. going to be creating a couple tulips. For these tulips, we're going to create vertical stitches. For this first one, I'm creating 3 vertical stitches. Now to make the tulip part, begin with 1 stitch at the top of your stem that you just created and do a slight diagonal stitch. Now for the second stitch, do the same thing as the other side, slight diagonal. We want these petals to be shorter than our last one in the center. Now for this last one, it's just right in the center in between those last 2 petals we just created, and it'll just be straight up, just longer than the last 2. So I went ahead and already created 2 other tulips after the one we made together. Here I just wanted to show you how to create a little leaf off of our tulip stems. It's very simple. You just go through the stem and create a diagonal stitch. So that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you guys were able to follow along okay. This was my very first YouTube video, but I do plan on making more in the future, so be sure to subscribe. I'll see you all in the next one.